I'm Josiah.
And I'm Adam.
We are still at a gun shop.
Today we're here with Dan Gates from Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you guys, and we're going to try to cross-pollinate our shows.
Yeah.
And we're doing some filming tomorrow on Evergreen, but I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you guys and put our heads together on some of the stuff. You guys have been big supporters of CRWM and what we're doing on our podcasts and stuff and messaging, and it's good to sit down in your studio and kind of hash some of the status of where we're at out.
Yeah. I think we really appreciate you scheduling us into your schedule.
Yeah.
Being that you're all around the state.
Yeah, I've been traveling still this year. Actually, this year has gotten worse than last year during the campaign.
Really?
I mean, people said, "Oh, you're getting a chance to slow down." I'm like, no, it's actually picked up almost double.
Why do you feel that is?
I think honestly, what happened on 127 last year, while they arose a sleeping giant on our side, we pissed them off.
Yep.
And I said this on a couple other podcasts and said it in a public presentation. I did a deal for the Colorado Mule Deer Association last week over in Grand Junction. Last year during the campaign, there was 5 legitimate animal rights lobbyists in the state of Colorado, big ones. There might have been some smaller ones, but big ones from the national groups.
Yeah.
There was 5. This year there's 18.
18.
So, I mean, they almost quadruple their resources because they know this current governor has a limited amount of time and his husband has a limited amount of time to accomplish what they want. And I think they're tripling down to make sure they get exactly what they want. And there's a ton of things that we can talk about to show it's not a fear tactic. It's not the sky's falling. They're doing it as we speak. Right.
It's something that Josiah and I have actually talked about, is that it seems like the chess pieces are being moved to essentially dominate the board is what's happening.
Yes.
One thing that we referenced was the hiring of the state land board gal.
Nicole Rose Marino.
Yep. And she was the governor's personal wildlife and agricultural policy advisor, but she was the better half of Commissioner Jay Touchton, who worked for the Humane Society of the United States and Wild Earth Guardians for better than 30 years as an attorney. And now he's a commissioner. And last commission meeting, now he's been elected the vice chair of the commission. So we got a couple pieces that have moved there into the places that we're, it puts us, as hunters, as, gun shop owners. The thing that we kind of talked about not too long ago was with the new initiative and the defunding, or the look of defunding CPW, which has done an amazing job, I think, over the last many decades. It puts us into a weird position where you have 003 and you have all this anti-hunting stuff going on with the possible defunding of CPW. So where does that leave? Where does that leave everything, you think, in regarding 003 is dependent on CPW, right? Because they have to manage the licenses, they have to manage the approvals, the classes.
Yep.
Who takes over? Well, I want to say too that anybody that listens to our podcast and your podcast, it's not CPW's fault.
No,
they got handed a bill of goods.
Yes,
and I'm already seeing things through social media. It's like, blaming CPW, but just like blaming CPW for the wolf deal.
Yeah,
CPW is a law enforcement agency, a managing agency that takes its direction from the state law.
Right.
And when the law tells you that you're going to do something, either you quit or you don't, or you get fired.
Right.
And so I think that where CPW is held up right now is trying to figure out how they're going to be able to implement and facilitate that in conjunction with many other things. And I'm not so sure where they're going to end up, because they're being handed a bill of goods that they're not so sure that they have the shopping cart to be able to carry.
I mean, do they have the resources currently?
No, but they're going to get that resource from the park side as a loan, so to speak.
Okay.
And then that money will be paid back. And people need to understand that when they merged back in 2012, the money side of parks and wildlife was never merged together.
Yeah.
The
Okay,
agency merged, but the money side never
Right.
merged. It can't merge because of the Pittman Robertson Dingell Johnson side of things from the federal excise tax and the funding. If they do that, they will lose.
Right.
And there's a federal audit that goes through that. So people might say that there's hanky-panky going on. I played in this game for 25 years. Well, we might not like what's going on.
Right.
The feds will audit the state when it comes to excise tax that's distributed through Pittman Robertson and Dingell Johnson on every state level. And so that money comes in. If you cross the barrier, like people have alluded to on the 003, oh, that's in violation. No, it's not. The way they structured it, money coming from the park side to fund, and then the money generated off of the facilitation and the implementation of 003 then pays the park side back. It does not come from PJ,
Right.
Pittman Robertson and Dingell Johnson. It doesn't. And so people need to understand that while we don't fully comprehend how it's going to happen, I guarantee that when the feds are sticking their nose into things, they will make sure that everybody's T's are crossed and their I's are dotted.
So you also have there's no reimbursement on a county level for the sheriffs running the background check for the application, and they can't make a profit. They just have to make enough money to cover the costs.
Yes.
So if there's $100,000 worth of costs, they have to make $100,000 and not exceed that. And
Exactly.
there's no way for them to basically borrow money to fund that. They just have to come up with it and the resources on a local level as well.
Exactly.
Then too. Okay.
Yeah. There's so many pieces of this equation, and like you guys are familiar with on the implementation of the state license and how that's taken place or how it's not taken place. I mean, there's really not anybody that really understands. It's kind of like the way I've given it to legislators and that we worked with through the Legislative Sportsman's Caucus is it's like, I want to start a football team. But I don't know crap about a football team, but I want to start one. Where you want to have it? Well, somewhere where they like football. Well, what are you going to call it? Well, something that goes along with football. And who's going to fund it? People that like football. I mean, it's a facetious statement, but trying to get people to understand they're getting the cart in front of the ass,
Right.
and they don't even have carrots to feed the ass.
Yeah, they hired the athletic trainer before even having anybody
Yeah,
else.
and he played badminton. He didn't play football.
Well, even when they were putting in the amendments to move money away and appropriately to the park side, they were even talking about like SB 003 is going to be funded by these people, and we estimate X amount of dollars are going to be. Well, what if nobody does it? Nobody goes through that process. Now we've appropriated enough money from parks to put all this in place, and it's never going to get paid back.
And
because
that's a problem theory that they're coming up with now, because they're like, the assumption was the numbers that I heard was somewhere around 80,000 of those firearms per year in the state of Colorado. There was guesstimates between 30 and 60,000, but then I heard 80,000 that could be.
Right.
Well, I tell you what, I'll never buy another gun. And that falls into those restrictions. I'll do it beforehand, or I'll do something. I don't know, but I'll never buy another gun to go through those restrictions. So I think you guys are probably going to get heavy on the front end,
Yeah.
and people are going to try to beat the deadline, which is often the case when they're implementing any sort of firearms legislation. Is everybody goes out and does it.
Yep.
I mean, I know on certain occasions in my adult life, I've stocked up on things in firearms and ammunition, just like people did in toilet paper during COVID.
Yeah, a lot of people bought primers.
Yeah, and I still have like 400,000 of them. So if you need any, let me know. But I mean, how much toilet paper did people buy that they still have sitting around from 2020?
There's probably a few.
Yeah.
Honestly.
My wife's like, and she keeps going to the store and buying more. I said, but you're not going to do that with firearms.
Yeah.
Now if you have to have a background check for ass wipe, I guess you're going to turn around and have to do something different.
That's new for 27.
Yeah,
27. Implementation.
But I think this is being written, as you guys know, on the state license side of things as they move forward.
Yeah.
It's a very piss poor plan.
It's in my view, I feel like it also lacks the communication on stuff that's already implemented from a federal level. So when you speak with ATF, and they say, yeah, this is how we do it, but you need to reach out to your state. And then more recently reaching out to the state, and they say, well, whatever the ATF said. Okay. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Why? Okay. So so what I'm kind of getting at there is that they've created all these like different rules, different things, and we already have a lot of that stuff in place.
Not only do you have it in place, you have sideboards that protect the things that are in place, and things that there are sometimes redundant to keep the things in place as well. And what they've implemented on some of these things, I think, obviously there's going to be some sort of legal challenge at some level. I don't know what level. But and for the people that don't know, things have to take effect. They have to go into law before there can be a legal challenge.
Right.
That doesn't sound right, but until it's a law, until it's in effect, there is no possibility for legal challenge. You guys have been playing in this arena for the last year.
Significantly in the last year, just with compliance on a federal level. I mean, all during Biden's administration, you had the zero tolerance policy where you have 5 different categories, and if you ding one of those, you lose your FFL. I want to say during that process, we saw in the state maybe 3 or 4 that we had connections with, like actually lose their license through that. But then even through the same numbers and studies, you're looking at less than 1% of FFLs being the cause of firearms being used illegally. And even that number is even smaller, because those numbers are actually taken from people that bought legally through that process that they trace all the way back, which I say we get traces probably 6 to 7 times a month and comply on a regular basis, just to see where those guns are coming from. So you still have, they didn't use us as a stakeholder. They didn't use anybody on, how do we keep our ammunition safe from being stolen with the new ammunition ban that's going into effect. Or I shouldn't say ban, but the prohibition, the prohibition portion of how we can display it and stuff. They didn't use us as stakeholders in the least bit, let alone consult the ATF on what they have in place that they could add or, amplify on a state level. So it's just like you're saying, like, what's the ATF say? Well, you got to talk to the state. Well, state says got to talk to the ATF. And
that's like, it reminds me of when I was a kid. Can I do this? Ask your mom.
Yeah.
You go ask your mom, ask your dad. It's like, both of them, they couldn't come up with a decision. I'd go do it. Right. Then they said, who the hell decided he could do that?
I think the big thing too that needs a little bit of clarity too on the zero tolerance stuff was the people that did have licenses revoked during that time. We're not talking about people that were selling guns out the back door type stuff. This is like clerical error, filing issues. Not like didn't run a background check, not didn't validate a license or something like that. This is literally like misplaced paperwork in a filer. Which is kind of wild to me.
Not organized per the investigator or the examiner's, requirements, which is, there is no playbook to run a gun shop in any state, let alone in the state of Colorado. And now with the new, firearms dealer division, they've moved the goalposts and still not given us a true, guideline or even boards to figure out, okay, if we stay between this and we achieve this, we're going to be okay. And they still haven't put true definitions. The last time I checked, definitions were still unpublished, and we're coming up on, a few days before everything goes into effect on the 1st.
And you're supposed to turn around and figure stuff out. Because how long was it before they actually got their ass together on the fingerprints?
We haven't. Well, we just got a code last week.
But it was supposed to be done May 1st or April 1st.
So we had to have an application in and our employees' information in by the 2nd of May. And then on the 15th of May, they got the number that is used for the fingerprint process to go to the third party instead of, or even go to the sheriff to get that. They didn't release it, I think, until it was later in the month, it was maybe 5 days after that. And then now none of the fingerprint locations are taking or doing fingerprints because CBI won't take the code until July 1st.
And and I, for all transparency, I'm a federal firearms dealer, but we don't have a store anymore. And the acquisition of firearms on our end and the distribution of firearms on our end is primarily for transfers, raffles, auctions, fundraisers for nonprofits and stuff. And that's the main reason we've kept it. And you guys have been great sponsors of our events, and so we legally transfer and then we legally retransfer or whatever we need to do. But the average person doesn't realize the complexities of what it takes for them to acquire a firearm. And like you guys are going to be at our event on August 8th and 9th for Outdoorsman Days. Okay, so you're going to have firearms transferred to you from us that we acquired, that were sponsored or acquired from another gun dealer. That person then, who wins that through a raffle or through an auction, has to wait 3 days to be able to acquire that firearm.
After completing the background check in person.
Now, question, can they complete the background check on site? Or that has to come in here. So that's another complexity.
It's the state.
So, and that's the state side.
Right.
Now on the federal side, you could have done that.
Yeah.
So you're mandated by the feds because you can't operate without a federal license.
Correct.
But you can't operate without a state license. See, that's like, I mean, it's like it'd be like saying, okay, you can hunt deer in the state of Colorado.
Yeah.
But you have to have this permission slip from the state, not the agency that manages wildlife, from the state. And the undermining and the manipulation of this is almost to the point, and it's not comical to us because we're in the business. It's not comical for the general public to be able to turn around and be able to fulfill their Second Amendment rights through a legal binding process. Did you think that when you got into the gun business, the firearms supportive business, that you would have to deal with anything like this?
You understand there are regulations, and you understand there's certain criteria for compliance. And I think I've had a great relationship with the ATF, our local guy, the team, up in Denver. This one site visit we had, I thought we generated a good, back and forth of understanding what was needed, what they interpreted, the playbook, if you want to call it that, and then understanding like we could get another agent or an investigator in that says, well, I prefer it this way. Can you sort it this direction? And okay, we can. And that's only because we're on a digital platform where a lot of the smaller places all still use the paper forms, make the phone call to CBI. With the new FDD, if there is an issue with and so CBI handles all of the processing of our background checks. So we get approvals from them. Well, the Department of Revenue and the FDD are standalone by themselves. So the FDD feeds the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue tells CBI we can no longer do business because we failed to meet criteria that we still don't have a clue, or I shouldn't say clue, but we don't know quite where that boundary is. So we could be in operation 1 hour and the next operation try and submit a background check and CBI says, sorry, you're not in compliance. Department of Revenue / the FDD have told us that we can no longer process your background checks.
How the hell did they determine that?
So that would be an on-site visit, failure to comply with. A customer comes in and they have to fill out a pistol form, revolver, pistol, description of the firearm. So we fill all that information out. If we fail to give that information to the FDD, they could say that's a strike or that's a fine, or worse, you can no longer do business in the state of Colorado because you're not complying with the regulations. They move it up to Department of Revenue. Department of Revenue says, no, you're not in compliance, and tells CBI no longer take it.
And the other bill that they passed, the Department of Revenue now has the ability to make those individuals peace officers.
And that covers a ton of different Department of Revenue, including the FDD.
Yeah, so those peace officers would then be the enforcement to be able to come onto a location and say...
It's the step around the sheriffs.
Yeah.
Is really what it comes down to. Yeah. If you look at it just 50,000 foot view, it's really because there's sheriffs that do believe in the Second Amendment. Thank you to all of them that have supported and been outspoken about that. But That's why they created that.
Yep.
That's 100%.
And they don't need an appointment. They can just show up.
So during the working group, they had several discussions on you have to have posted hours. So one of the individuals that was a working group member said, per the city and the county, I can't post hours on my house because I live in a rural location, but I have a great working relationship with the ATF. Okay, well, fine. We'll set up an appointment with you. And then all of us brick and mortar people are like, hold on a second, like we want appointments as well. Why would you give a leniency to them and create, some leniency as far as when they can show up when we kind of need that leniency as well? We're open 9 to 5:30, whatever it is during the week, and you can just pop in at any time. Why wouldn't we want the same courtesy of, hey, let us know when you're stopping in so we can make sure we have somebody dedicated to you to make sure we're compliant? And they kind of softened that up, and now we operate within these certain business hours or appointment only, with the potential of them just showing up whenever.
Big thing with that too, Dan, is that what's not understood on that side is the disruption in business that occurs when they do come in to do a site visit. It takes myself, Josiah, whoever else, off the floor to, help these folks. It's not that we're avoiding or, it's just we have to find paperwork, look things up, be attentive to these folks. So it creates a huge disruption in just the flow, right, of business.
Yep.
Well, especially, so I'm a federal firearms dealer. I'm also a pesticide applicator in the state of Colorado. On the federal side, they've always set an appointment.
Yeah.
On the state side, for the Department of Ag, they've always set an appointment. That way you can work it around your business hours and model because you're trying to stay in business.
Right.
Yep.
They're not being very accommodating to this whole process for what they're wanting to do. I mean, it's like anybody that's in business understands cold calling as a salesman into somebody's business might work if you just happen to be driving through town and you have a little bit, but I don't need people stopping into my location unless they have a van load of stuff that I can turn around and go out and pick through, like blankets and beads or whatever. But outside of that, it was an appointment.
Yeah.
And if you have the regulatory agency, the overseer, the enforcer, wanting to come in and turn around and whatever, see your books or look at your operation, yeah, it's a disruption, but there's no accountability for that disruption, is there?
No. You said pesticides. With what's currently going on right now on the state side with the back and forth with 82, 52, all that stuff, how does the pesticide stuff look going forward? I mean, we look at the hunting stuff, but...
Yeah, because I mean, for what was Initiative 52, then it became Initiative 82, and now is Initiative 98.
Yeah.
All three of those are different versions of one particular interest group's attempt to try to disband and defund Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and it says it multiple times. It's not hyperbole. It's not a hypothesis.
Yeah.
That's what they want to do. When you turn around and come up with the ballot initiative language, and the title is 2 sentences, and the entire scope of that ballot initiative is 10 pages, there's a lot more into that than what the average guy would be able to decipher.
Could you explain what it actually costs to implement a ballot initiative too? Because at this point they have 52, or 52 fell off, right?
52's off, but it started as 52.
Okay, and then we have 82 and then 98.
Yeah, 82 still there in the wings, just like what they did on, let's say our opponents on Initiative 91, which became Prop 127. Yeah. They ran 2 ballot initiatives at the same time. It was 91 and 101. And we were fighting both of those through the Secretary of State Title Board, and eventually a potential challenge on both of them at the Supreme Court. We were offering to challenge 101. Didn't have to because they felt like they needed to go back to 91.
Okay.
On 52, they couldn't get what they wanted to get through legislative council, so they turned it into 82, and they revised a bunch of their language. Although the average person would look at it and go, "I don't see any difference."
Yeah.
Now it's to 98. The cost of that is a cup of coffee and some time for somebody to be able to turn around, sit, and go do this. I mean,
Really?
you and I.
And is it an individual inside the state that is a proponent of this, or is this somebody outside of the state that's suggesting this and or writing these ballot initiatives?
On this particular case, it was done by people in state.
Okay.
Individuals with a level of higher education, School of Mines in CU Boulder, I believe.
Okay.
Just like last year, when Initiative 91 was first formulated, individuals in state, out-of-state connections, out-of-state finances, which then became bigger out-of-state finances. There's not been a determination off of 82 or 98 of where money would be coming from, but we have a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
But these are individuals, and anybody for that matter, and a registered voter in the state of Colorado can turn around and say, hey, I don't want Adam to walk his pit bull after dark in Salida. So we need to turn around and do that. Well, you can't do it just for that because it's a state deal. Okay, well, I don't want anybody to walk their pit bull after dark in anywhere. And so if you could come up with a language and go through legislative council, that they would dissect that language and tell you, you need to cross this, and this needs to be stricken, and this needs to be added, or whatever. Then if you could go through that, you could go through the title board. And if the title board's job is to determine a single subject, essentially that's it. If you remember what we had to do on Initiative 91, that we were arguing to get trophy hunting out because trophy hunting was an oxymoron when it came to explaining the other parameters of what they were trying to get. The title board agreed with us, took trophy hunting out. We're very thankful for that because it would have been more difficult for us to get it across the finish line because trophy hunting is an interpretation. What is trophy hunting?
Yeah.
Somebody will say, well, they just want to hang it on the wall. Okay, well, what if you don't? What if you want to take pictures of it? Oh, that's trophy hunting. What if I just want to mount my kid's first fish? That's trophy fishing. And so, but the way that the statutory component is for you to get involved on a ballot initiative, and 26 states have it. They don't all have the exact parameters as sideboards to it, but 26 states have it. You can come up with the most ludicrous freaking thing that you could possibly think of, and which they have on multiple occasions. And for anybody that doesn't know, they can keep an eye on the Secretary of State's website, and you can see how many initiatives are filed. And I think right now, obviously, we're at like probably 101 or 107. That's 101 or 107 coming up for, some would be for the 2026 election, because that would not have to do with taxes. Anything that's taxes will have to go on the 25 election. So there's still things being done for 2025 November, tax-based, and there's things being done for 2026. The interesting thing is we haven't gotten a determination yet on 98 because there's a TABOR component to that for a 0.05%.
Yeah.
And so it's five. I think it's $5 on every 100.
Yeah.
In hopes of raising $150 million.
But how much money is coming from the general fund to stand the WEC up, though?
Yes.
$5 million?
$5 million to be able to start. Okay. And so when you add all this stuff in there, to me, it could not be considered single subject. The Secretary of State would not be able, the title board would not be able to turn around and say this. However, it's been explained to us because like the first one or the second one on Initiative 82, that's the Colorado Wildlife Biodiversity Protection Act. Okay, so it's been interpreted to us that would be the single subject, to create the Biodiversity Protection Act. And then whatever falls into that act would be subjective for interpretation down the road.
Right.
But people would be voting on the single subject. I don't know whether the title board would eat that up as much, because if you look at it, there's about 40 different bullet points in 82, and there's like 45 bullet points in 98.
Yeah, it just seems like it kept getting thicker and thicker as
if you listen to the hearing on 82, the Legislative Council hearing, and actually, I'll mention on Friday the 27th, when this podcast airs, the first Legislative Council hearing on 98 will be heard, and we'll see where some of this stuff goes. It'll start to take some sort of form. The thing that scares me is the proponents of the particular measures have been the same ones moving through the process. And they asked Legislative Council the last go around, so how many times can we come back to you? And they said, as many times as you want or need to. They said, okay, thank you very much. You'll be seeing us. And so they're trying to refine their message to see what would maybe garner some support, or that would be just completely off base to where they knew they wouldn't be able to get it through. Okay, we'll go somewhere else. The thing that concerns me is a lot of the opponents that we're having to deal with, and you and I we're all talking about, is that if something can be done through the commission, like this potential fur ban initiative that Samantha Miller just instated or submitted to the commission, if something could be done for some of this other stuff on these initiatives, and they could accomplish some of it at the commission and maybe accomplish some of it through the legislature, now, okay, now we're going to take these off of the initiative to go through Legislative Council, because we know that these two other forms of government are working on these for us, or we have a chance.
So now
off 98 doesn't look so bad,
right?
And they can turn around and knock some of the things off of it. And then if they do get through the process and they do get a title set, then it's easier for them to get in front of the general public for 6 months, 180 days to collect the right amount of signatures next year. Maybe they can do it this year, but next year. And say, look, we took all this stuff out because we're really concerned about this, and the legislature is undertaking this, and the commission is undertaking that, and this will fix this, and this will fix that. So you're not really voting on all of that. You're only voting on the real nuts and bolts of this.
So when you look at it from the Biodiversity Act, and you see that the gal that was placed at the State Land Board, they're going to be in charge of a lot of this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you look at the way that this is being written, and who would be in charge, it would get rid of the Parks and Wildlife Commission. It would get rid of the agency, so to speak, because it talks about over and over in there about defunding and disbanding.
Right.
You don't talk about defunding and disbanding something unless your intention is to defund and disband.
That was something else to put into place.
Yeah, right. It's literally setting up the railroad tracks to just run this thing through, right? And then they can make every single thing go the way they want it to go.
Yeah.
Keystone species.
And determine it on public and private land.
Yeah.
And determine what you can do and how you can do it. And that has to do with the agriculture industry. It has to do with the oil and gas, has to do with the mining, has to do with the timber, has to do with the recreation, has to do with the water, has to do with hunting and fishing. It doesn't matter what it is. They will be the body that turns around and says when, why, what, where, and how.
Whoa.
And people would vote on that, and people would feel empowered because I have a say in biodiversity, and I want to do this Protection Act.
You mentioned it. What are they trying to fix?
They're looking for a problem.
Right. So if you look at what CPW has done in the last 125 years, or let alone the last four,
you got those numbers down.
Last 4 decades, with the management of over 900 species, with the management and I would say the ability to bring back species and have a growing population of several that are part of the consumptive process. In our conversations, I can't keep looking at this and going, oh, they're trying to fix this, they're trying to fix that. They're trying to find a problem, or are they trying to create a problem that they can then fix with, lining up that railroad that they can then, we empowered the people for this, and now we have this in place. Now we're going to be able to fix that.
When you see how many things are being thrown at the general public in Colorado, whether they vote or whether they don't vote, I'd like to think that most of them vote, and a lot of them voted in our favor on 3 different accounts last year. But that doesn't mean that's always going to stay the course. That when you see what the general public is being fed, most of it is somebody trying to get somebody to do something that they don't fully understand, and they just hope that some key words and key phrases will turn around and allow them to do so. Just like 003. We're gonna create this mechanism that makes people safer, just like they did on the excise tax last year that people voted on during the election. While I'm bragging on 308 and 309 and 127, we lost the excise tax ban. And people think that money is going to go somewhere, and I don't know the exact language what you guys are putting at the door at the counter sales or whatever, but it's going to go to mental health, and it's going to go to other components that it's not going to have a rat's ass bit of difference when it gets down to it.
Well, they just were able to appropriate another, basically use that money however they need now, instead of how they wrote it in. Now they just pass another bill. Now that the money's being collected, now they have the ability to use that money as needed. So our county is probably never going to see any of that money.
No.
And
the funny thing is they can't touch it until 27.
Yeah.
So my suspicion says the lawsuit that's out there against it has validity.
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting.
Because that took effect.
April
1.
Yeah.
So my question is somebody keeping records that if that doesn't go through,
Yeah, we're paying the state.
then so it doesn't go through, and John Doe came into Slide a Gun Shop and bought $1,100 worth of ammunition to shoot for a 4-H trap shooting deal or whatever.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go through. Does John Doe get his money back on the 6.5%? Does anybody? I mean, does that money go to fight the lawsuit?
Yeah. Probably against us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
I mean, those are things that you look at the overreach and getting in front of your skis, and that's what we're seeing on all the stuff on the wildlife side. That's what the ag community is doing on wolves.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not, and I wish people would pay attention more to what is going on, because there's a lot of things that are going to happen in the next 6 to 8 or 10 months because of the commission and the legislative session that will set the tone and narrative for the next gubernatorial election in 2026.
Yeah.
And if some of these ballot initiatives get on there, and they haven't fixed some of these other things that are happening on the firearms or other forms of wildlife management or the wolf debacle, if they haven't fixed any of this stuff, you're going to see a turn and a tide, I think, to where there's going to be a lot of questions, because Polis is out. He's term limited. People keep saying, well, we need to get him out. We need to get him out. He's going to be out.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
You know, he's not going to be governor the next go around.
The lack of understanding on that one just drives me kind of crazy a little bit.
Yes.
When you see that all the time posted everywhere, it's like, you guys, he's term limited.
Yes.
He can't, there's no more.
Yeah. And all of the things that are playing into, I think it's either a perfect storm or it's going to be a blinding blizzard to the point to where we can't stop anything that's going to happen because of the ignorance of the general public, because they don't pay attention straight across the board. Luckily, the general public came out in full force and listened to what our message was on 127. They wanted science-based wildlife management. They wanted experts managing their wildlife and not a bunch of lunatic animal rights extremists that were trying to undermine and circumvent Colorado Parks and Wildlife's ability, just like what is happening in this next go around, trying to undermine and manipulate Colorado Parks and Wildlife's ability to manage Colorado's wildlife resources in perpetuity.
The big thing that I look at is the statement you've made multiple times, 4 to 8 hours.
Yeah.
4 to 8 hours. Just 4 to 8 hours.
Yep.
Pay attention. Help us. Help us help you.
Right.
Get off your ass. Please get off your ass. I mean, it's to a point to where if we don't, we can't.
Yeah.
And we won't.
No.
There will be no more.
Too lost.
With what is transpiring, and you guys were paying attention a little bit, and I want to say thank you for the friendship we built up, and what you guys have done to support and sponsor everything that, you know. I either must be a really good salesman, or you felt sorry for me like I was some dog out of the freaking shelter.
It was excitement. It was excitement to be part of something that we know we need to be on that side. That was the side that we needed to help hoist up and help you get the message out there. And the opportunity that you gave us, I think, is something that we could never repay. And this opportunity to sit down with you is another one. I don't think we'll ever be able to show you how much you know it means to us, and I think to maybe a majority of our viewers, and maybe those that are looking to garnish that information because of the word that you guys put out there on 127 is like, don't listen to me, right? You said that several times. Don't listen to me. Let's listen to the experts. And if you look at Ballot Initiative 98 and 82, the WEC in 98, it explicitly says may consult. So we saw that early on. Words matter, right? So they may consult the experts, and they're not necessarily putting experts in place to be part of that commission or part of that whole wildlife board. Why would people then, if we put out the same type of wording or the same type of understanding, like, do you want to listen to somebody that is being appointed based off of potentially DEI, potentially somebody that has connections higher up, or do you want to listen to the experts, the people that have been doing it for this long time? Do you think that's a common thing that we can kind of push forward with these new ballot initiatives to make sure that? I
think if people just get off their asses and start paying attention a little bit more and what they're seeing, because we capitalized off of what happened on Proposition 114 with the wolf issue.
Yeah.
That was in the news every single day or week during the entire campaign that we were fighting on 127.
More so now.
Yeah.
More so now.
And it's just elevating up the lunacy of the debacle that's been created. And I want to emphasize, I sat on the stakeholder advisory group. I was on there for 16 of the 18 months. And for a variety of reasons, I stepped aside for the last 2, which is not this part of this conversation. But we have things that we can control if we engage, but if we don't, that the saying on the back of my hat, if you're not sitting at the table, you're on the menu. Well, there's nothing more true to that statement when you get into any of these conversations. The reason that I'm involved in it as a citizens chair for the Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, the reason that I do the Colorado Trappers and Predator Hunters, the reason I was just appointed to the Sportspersons Roundtable, or that I'm the executive director for CRWM, or that I did all these other boards and committees, is because the only way that you're going to turn around and make any difference from our perspective is to sit at the table. And I don't expect everybody to do what I've done. I mean, you'd be a freaking idiot if you did, or divorced and broke. There's a component, but
God bless Karen.
I think she thanks me that I'm gone as much as what I am, because she doesn't listen to me bitch and complain about it. But 4 to 8 hours a year.
That's not much.
If 1 million sportsmen and women in the state of Colorado, hunters and anglers, donated, not to a banquet, not to a fundraiser, not to something fun, donated 4 to 8 hours a year, you got 4 to 8 million hours of donation time to turn around and say, I'm going to hold a yard sign up, or I'm going to go to the testify, or I'm going to turn around and figure out who the hell my legislator is. I mean, an individual, we're getting land blasted so much on CRWM right now because we're not engaging in the public land fight. We're not engaging in the wild horse deal. We're not engaging in the wolf deal. We're not engaging on the firearms deal. And I'm like, hey, look, let us concentrate on our wheelhouse, and we can be subjective and try to engage at these other levels. But we're not big enough, powerful enough, financially strong enough, let alone the time to be able to turn around and put all of our dedicated resources into every single one of these issues. If you look at the public land side of things, that's important. But what people don't understand is I'm having weekly conversations with people that are playing on that landscape, from the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Project, the federal leaders, the guys on national organizations that are coming to the table that have more intimate knowledge than 99% of the yahoos that you see on public land that are kicking stuff out there that is partially right or completely wrong, or they calling somebody out or praising somebody else and they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
I can honestly say I have a lack of understanding of, I thought the whole thing was they were going to get rid of or make for sale small tracts that aren't being managed, that are not used in, per se, hunting, fishing, or any of that sort of thing. Is that wrong?
It partially, but not. But there's the component there, from my understanding, and listening to Ryan Bronson with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, who's their legislative guru. And we're trying to get a shooting that we did, a screen shooting, not a shooting. We're saying talking about a gunshot. To get something more explicitly distributed on social media.
That would be nice.
And so 0.25 to 0.75% is the understanding that we've got. So it's around 3 million acres. But the 3 million acres, and I'll give an example. When they were talking through the House side of the reconciliation bill on the federal level, we heard 2.5 million, we heard 3 million. in theory, it was a pretty good chunk of land, but there was about 104,000 acres, according to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and what we had originally put out on some of our social media from them. The 104,000 acres would be the land that you'd be looking at, because the other stuff would have been compromising and negotiating and conglomerating land together.
Okay.
So it would have been trade. It would have taken this because we got checkerboard here, we got this crap over here, there's no access to here. Let's turn around and trade this and put it into that. Now,
and that currently happens in the oil and gas lease stuff all the time.
It happens on private land acquisitions and distribution as it is.
All the time.
I mean, I sat on the Habitat Stamp Committee for 8 years and was the chair of that damn thing for 3. You wouldn't believe how much stuff, when people came to us for conservation easement requisitions or appointments, that we're going to do this. So next year, when we get this done this year, next year we'll have this, but we're trading this land over here to square up some of this property over here.
Okay.
That happens on a federal level and a state level anyway.
Yeah.
Now,
I've seen it personally.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, we have this 40 acres over here. You guys have this 40 acres over here. How about we swap this stuff? So that way you're connected here, we're connected here. Done.
Yes. And I see that the Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, State Land Board stuff. However, when the House turned around and said, okay, well, we're not going to go that route, then Senator Lee then turned around and picked it up and said, we're going to go that route. That's where the confusion came in, to the point to where everybody had an opinion and everybody had a perspective. And it's not 130 million acres of public land. It's not 260 million acres of public land. According to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, the information that they gave the CWCP the other day, it's about 3 million acres. And it's significant enough that where people should be concerned.
Yeah.
Not all of it has to do with all the stuff that the average guy would think, well, that's my public land. Some of it's going to be areas that they're talking about strictly for housing, that are up next against the urban corridors in the cities. Some of it would be probably huntable ground or recreational ground or grazing ground. The problem is that what we did on 127 last year, for a smaller target audience, we were able to rally the troops and get everybody on the same page. We circled the wagons.
Yeah.
Right now, there's so many different entities and organizations and states and people that want to pursue different things, whether it's mountain biking or bighorn sheep.
Right.
They're not all on the same page, because the biggest same page that they have is call your legislator. What we're getting through CRWM is, how do I find out about my legislator? Who's my legislator? During the House side of things, we had dozens and dozens and dozens of people in Colorado saying, I called my representative. You're a federal congressman? I don't know. They were calling their representative here.
Yeah.
They were leaving a message for these representatives, not their federal representatives. So they wanted to get engaged, but before they found out the facts, they got engaged to the wrong deal, and either they might have been embarrassed, or they might have made an ass out of themselves and they didn't get a response, or they thought that they could change the world and they didn't.
Yeah.
So then they didn't pick it up to turn around and follow up on the federal side.
Yeah.
Education in politics
It's a big thing.
is the biggest thing. And as you guys are finding out, you've been coming to the Capitol with us the last couple of years and want to pull your teeth out.
It's kind of interesting, honestly. And I think it's entering into a game that you don't know the rules. Though they're there, you just don't know how it's played, right? So your initial reaction is like, oh man, there's a lot of stuff to think about here. But what's funny is the people that have played the game for a long time, I'm not saying you, but I'm saying maybe the people who are elected, they're like, ha, we got these guys fooled. Honestly.
Right.
Like, they know how the game's played.
Yeah.
They know that if I give you this, we can go over here and do this.
There's a lot of trading. There's a lot of bartering. There's a lot of compromising and negotiating. There's a lot of unintended consequences that come out of things, because does this affect me acting like a representative or a senator? Does this affect my constituents in my district?
Right.
Or do I care about what happens in Joe's district over here, because Joe needs this money to come from the federal side, and if I vote no on this, that's going to screw Joe more than it is me, because he's more of a rural community, more of a rural district. If anybody has ever gone to the Capitol and watched the Senate from the the gallery or watch the house. And I joke about the house, and I've got friends that are in the house. Mm-hmm. But it looks like feeding time at the vervet cage at the zoo or something. I mean, it's the most disorganized bunch of elected individuals you'd ever see in your life. The Senate, I think, is more professionally done. There's a little bit level of decorum. Mm-hmm. Plus, there's only 35 of them versus 65. Yeah. So it's kind of like going to a 5th grade class versus a 2nd grade class with a substitute teacher. I mean, there's a big difference in the way that they do things. Yeah. But the average person doesn't understand the entire process of what we have to deal with. Mm-hmm. And I just wish that whether it's the public lands issue or the gun issue or something that has to deal with mountain lions and wolves and fur bands and all the other stuff that's coming down the pike, know who the hell you're supposed to talk to.
Yeah.
Know who the hell you're supposed to. If you don't know your representative, if you don't know your senator, if you don't know your county commissioner, they're making decisions on behalf of you, whether you voted for them or not, or whether you're there turning around and letting them know who you are. Mm. And the average person still today doesn't engage with those elected individuals, and they're speaking on your behalf, whether you know them or not.
Do you think with the platform that we're trying to build here, with the relationship with you, that it's possible for us to basically disseminate that information, like going forward, especially into an election cycle, so that we know, okay, Republicans, Democrat, we're going to lose by 20 if we vote down, party lines, but this Democratic, candidate is the best bet, and we need them to win. Is that something that we could is that something that we could disseminate that information, or at least provide that information, that if somebody was looking at good, better, best, how to vote in this next cycle on initiatives as well as candidates? Is that something that is possible?
Yeah, and it's actually something that CRWM and some other organizations are attempting to try to work on something that's more thinking about the behalf of sportsmen and women, the ag community, the firearms, individuals, just a general recreationist as a whole. 97% of all Coloradans recreate outdoors in some capacity. It might be walking a dog in open space, might be playing frisbee, it might be hunting bighorn sheep, it might be hang gliding or whatever, but 97%. Right. They have an interest.
Yep.
The concept, though, is, even during the last election, only about 54% of that 97% actually voted.
Really?
There's a bunch of people out there that are sitting there on the sidelines that either they thought it wasn't relevant or they just didn't give a rat's ass. And those are things, and we saw the same thing on the gun guys and the same thing on the sportsmen, but it was just straight across the board, recreationist, ag, whatever. I didn't have time. It ain't worth it. They've already made their decisions up. The chicken is already cooked.
But you look at the numbers, and they're so close. Some of these counties are so close.
Yeah.
So close.
Look what we did on 127 last year, and there was counties that we lost, that Colorado lost on the wolf issue in 2020, that we still lost a couple of those counties on 127, but we flipped 25 or 30 percentage points. So you might have lost the county, but you made up 30,000 votes.
Yeah.
I mean, you made up 15,000 votes.
Do you think that was a voting total, or is that a complete flip then?
I think a lot of it is a complete flip, and I think that's one reason why a lot of the current gubernatorial candidates are looking at the last year's election and reaching out to us and some of the other conservation-minded sportsmen and women agriculture groups, because they know that they're not running against Jared Polis. They know that they're probably going to have Michael Bennett and Andy Weiser, or Phil Weiser, there at the same time.
Yeah.
They know that on our side, I say our side, the conservative Republican side of things, and here's the deal: I don't give a rat's ass one way or the other whether we get a Democrat or a Republican.
Right.
Just do what's right. Don't manipulate and undermine the entire process and the system the way that we've allowed to happen for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
If Greg Lopez becomes the next governor, or Jason Mikesell becomes the next governor, or Senator Baisley, or Scott Bottoms, Representative Bottoms, if they all become the next governor individually, fantastic. But if they don't do what's necessary to provide some sort of corrective action and set things in place that is good governance, I don't know why we would spend any time on any of those people.
Right.
And I think, honestly, the way that things are going, that the next election is probably, after 8 years of turmoil,
Yep.
the next election is going to be the decision-making election of where Colorado goes or where Colorado can stay and pick up.
And unwind, if possibly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely some unwinding to do if we get the right person.
Yeah, and I mean, I want people to make the decision based upon facts and data and statistics and logic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not agendas.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing in conversation with you is you always seem to have an amazing amount of information that is backed by stats, statistics, truth. And that's something I think a lot of the people that are listening to you on a weekly basis that are striving for the information that you're putting out there is this is common sense, this is factual, this is data that can be traced, and you don't have an agenda. Solely the fact like I want to continue to do what I do, and these are the facts that support it. Whereas with other people, they're throwing out, agendas.
If I'm sitting on this fur bearer working group, I've said that, and I've been on the fur bearer working groups in previous administrations as well. We changed a lot of the laws, rules, and regulations on behalf of animal welfare and best management practices starting back in 2016. I'm the first to say, and I've said it to the facilitator, and I've said it to my opposition, who I have somewhat of an agreeable relationship with, and some that I don't. But I've said, if the science said you shouldn't do this, I'd be the first in line to say, okay, well, we need to turn around and act differently.
Why wouldn't we?
That's the thing. Because I'm a conservation-minded individual. But I don't want you telling me I can't. But if the data and the statistics and the study and the science says that we have a problem with beavers, like which is coming up in a beaver management plan, or we shouldn't be doing anything with bighorn sheep. If the science said, but if Josiah says, I don't think you should do that, well, Josiah, you can kiss my ass. I mean, now if you turn around and had the data to be able to turn around and go that route, I'm all on board for that. The problem is, our adversaries. You saw what they did during the election in 127, and they do it every single time. They did it during the wolf issue. They're doing it on Initiative 98 or Initiative 82 or Initiative 52, whatever they say.
Yeah.
They don't believe the managing agency. They don't believe the Department of Ag. They don't believe Colorado Parks and Wildlife. They don't believe anybody has the truth because they're all servants to the sportsmen and the ag industry.
Why? Why do they feel that way? Because
they're taking something off of the landscape or doing something that they don't agree with. Period. If you listen to Jerry Abker talk 6 years ago when we fought the first citizens petition to ban the harvest of bobcats in the state of Colorado. Jerry, who was the former carnivore fur bearer biologist for CPW for 18 years, he retired with 36 years or something. When he got up and talked, he said, just because you have a brown blade of grass in a perfectly manicured landscape, golf course, football field, doesn't mean the entire field is warped.
Right.
Just because you take one animal out of a perfectly managed wilderness landscape with wildlife and habitat doesn't mean you're being detrimental to the entire management of the entire species or all of the species combined. I understand that, but my opponents don't want me to take that one.
Okay, so this stuff goes through, and we're kind of talking about that, right? So hunting, let's say, goes away. How are those animals managed?
They don't
manage them.
because they keep saying they self-manage. Well, maybe they self-manage when you got, but not when you have 6 million people on the landscape and 84 million visitors.
Yeah, the human component is never put in that.
Wolves did just fine in Colorado before Colorado was Colorado. When there were some Native Americans running around the landscape, and a million years before that, when there was a bunch of Neanderthals running around, wolves did fine. But as soon as you start putting the human population into part of the ecosystem, there's no way, shape, or form that something isn't going to suffer. I will use the Native American side of it. Native Americans were fine until the Western expansion and a bunch of white guys came out here and turned around. They didn't want the Native Americans to have what they did. Okay?
Diseases.
Yeah. Climate.
Yeah.
habitat?
Yeah.
How about the food source?
Yeah.
Stop and think. The way that the North American model,
Originated.
yeah, it was because of the exploitation.
The marca hunting.
So if there wasn't as many deer and elk, and there wasn't as many bighorn sheep and antelope, there wasn't as much for wolves to eat. Cattle were expanding in because of the western expansion side of things. So what were they going to do? They're going to chase the dumbest thing standing in the field because there wasn't as much other stuff that they had during the previous 2 or 3 or 4 generations.
Right.
We have had the opportunity to maybe not fix, but we've addressed a tremendous amount of the wildlife and the habitat and the conservation side of things over the last 125 years. And wolves can be a part of that in some capacity, like they were coming in through the natural cycle of attrition.
Right? Yeah.
But you put 6 million people in and 84 million visitors in one state, 6 million people who have more population than Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana combined.
Yep.
And those states are dealing with wolves in a capacity not to the level that we have. They didn't have as much detriment and destruction when they had 25 wolves on the ground.
Right.
Not until they had 250 or 300 or 400.
Really?
Because they didn't have 6 million people.
Oh, okay.
They didn't have this urban corridor division like what we have here. You know, I mean, we could talk about this shit all day long.
They've lost 9 already?
They've lost 9. Yeah.
Of 15? What was it? So it was 15 and then
15 and 15, I think.
So 30.
Yeah, so they're down around, and there were some that were here on the natural cycle of attrition.
Right.
And now they've determined that they think they have, I think, 3 litters of pups.
Okay.
What about on the southern border too with the Mexican wolf coming
So there's
up?
wolves down there, but they, to the best of my knowledge, I mean, they might have come back and forth, but they're not cohabitating together. But we're going to get another 15 wolves on the ground this year. You know,
We are?
Yeah. I mean, they're going to put them in on the ground.
Okay.
Do they have where they're releasing?
Well, they're probably likely going to end up putting them in the Southwest somewhere, but they can't. The Utes and the Southern Mountain Utes are trying to keep them out of the Bruneau Treaty area, which is from Gunnison all the way to the southern part of the state. And that's part of this problem is there's so many things that you can't do, and then the places that you can do it, there's that one bitch wolf that she's turned around, and I don't say bitch in a bad word, I say it because he's a bitch wolf.
Yeah.
That's a documented name.
Yes.
Alpha male, alpha female.
I hear you.
She's traveled over 3,000 miles in the state of Colorado.
That's the one that came around here.
Yeah. She's running back and forth all over God's creation, turning around and trying to figure out. And she went out. They think she went into Utah, and she might have went into Wyoming. She's come back 3,000 miles. Whether she's, I don't know, she's trying to figure out how to get a green card to go back across the border or whatever she's doing. But look at what we've done is we've created a conundrum. I sat on the stakeholder advisory group, and I'm trying to circle this back to the gun deal. They got the cart in front of the ass, and I'll be talking to some guys from the Middle Park stock growers tomorrow on the podcast. The plan that we came up with for the stakeholder advisory group, that the technical working group agreed to and the stakeholder group agreed to, went to the commission, and they agreed to it, and they signed off on it, and now they're not adhering to the plan. My fear on the gun side of things is there's going to be this plan that they're making up as they go. They didn't do it the technical side. They didn't do it the working group side like what we did over an 18-month period. They're building this debacle as they go. CPW now is having to deal with what the commission is dealing with. And the commission says, do this. The commission says, do that. The commission says, don't do this. The commission says, don't do that. They're separating themselves from the 261-page document, the plan, where they said they weren't going to do this, and they ended up doing it. They said they weren't going to do that. They ended up doing it. I think that you're going to run into the same quandary on the gun issues as they say, oh, that's not going to work. Let's do this.
Right.
I think there's going to be more. I mean, before 003, right in the initial hearings and whatnot, they already said that they want to do more.
I think there's going to be something, and I haven't had a chance to read it, but I heard it from 2 legislators this week. Actually, one on Friday. And I've been on the road, so I can't read 1,100 pages of something when I'm driving down the highway. There's something in the big, beautiful bill that would be detrimental to Coloradans being able to turn around and purchase or own firearms.
So in the big, beautiful bill, what's written in there is it's regarding suppressors and ownership of suppressors, short barrel rifles and short barrel shotguns. Anybody who's aware of suppressors and has used suppressors knows that they're not James Bond's assassin tool.
They're not a destructive device.
They're not a destructive device. Yeah. They're literally a tool that is a safety device, and in my opinion, for hearing. I'm 40 years old. I'm supposed to be wearing hearing aids. That's life before guns, but also guns. In that bill, what it's going to do is remove the NFA regulatory piece to suppressors, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns in the tax piece. What initially was there was that they would become illegal in Colorado because they'd be sold as a firearm without the protections of a licensed and permitted item. So, which they should be. They should just be sold over the counter as an accessory device, a safety device. There's been some work on this side from the Second Syndicate, CFFLA, which is the Colorado's FFL's association, James Cook, some other people that have gotten the wording from the Hearing Protection Act into the Big Beautiful Bill. So that way, that if that Big Beautiful Bill does go through, then on our side, they will be treated as they were licensed and permitted the same as an NFA item with just a 4473 background check. The huge thing that everybody's worried about, or it seems like from one side, is that, oh, these are killer's devices and stuff like that. And it in all honesty, I'm going to put it out there. The industry itself, we're not good at putting it out there that these are honestly hearing protection devices.
Yeah.
100%. And because a shotgun is shorter and because a rifle is shorter does not make it more lethal. Okay? Like, these people that have these ideas of like, this stuff is used in a certain way is insane. As Josiah said earlier, most of these firearms that are being used in illegal activities are not from licensed FFLs. No. This is not somebody coming in here and going, oh yeah, I'm going to buy one of these and da-da-da-da. It's like, we're on the side. We don't want mass shootings. We don't want people to go out and shoot each other. We don't want people to commit suicide. We want to educate and have this stuff out there and available to everybody. Everybody to exercise their Second Amendment right. But what everybody's worried about is that these are now going to become available to everybody. What they don't know is that suppressors have been selling like crazy for the last 2 years. Yeah. And I think people enjoy them. Once you shoot a gun with a suppressor, you're kind of like, wow, what have I been doing for the last 30, 40 years? You know, we got guys that are 80, 90 years old buying these things, and they're like, man, I wish I would have had this, you know, many years ago.
Yeah. And it's not a silencer.
No.
It's a suppressor.
Yeah. It's a suppressor. Yeah. It literally takes it. So they say from American Suppressor Association that a muzzle braked rifle is 180 decibels. Good suppressor, 140 decibels. That is literally still pretty loud.
Yeah.
It's not quiet. It's not movie quiet.
It modifies the sound.
Yeah.
Not just close, but far away.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit less disruptive in the hunting situation.
Absolutely.
But it's also just less disruptive to the other people that you're around.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're shooting on the range or in some sort of competition or something.
Yeah.
It doesn't increase the accuracy.
No.
It doesn't make anything other than just suppressing the noise to a level that is more tolerant.
Yeah. What's funny is these same people that are always afraid of this stuff, look at Summit County. Look at how much they've invested into sound barrier sound barrier protection from an HOA and a gun range that's been there for 15 years. Or they could have just said, hey, everybody's shooting here, has to shoot suppressed.
Yeah.
And it probably would have done more.
It was funny when we were shooting this weekend up in Cody. We're shooting a teams match, and there's other people shooting individuals. And I think we had 2 guys in our squad that weren't shooting suppressed, and it was almost kind of like, crap, you got to put your hearing pro back on. And the ROs were the same way. The guys that were spotting and helping out were all like, oh geez, put the hearing pro back on, and somebody would come up with suppressor, and like, oh, whew, much better, because you reduce concussion. Dirt doesn't get disturbed around you, doesn't throw up and get in your way, and it's just one of those things. Like when you shoot suppressed, it helps everybody out, let alone downrange.
But see, you mentioned something about messaging. We've done a very piss poor job on the federal side and the state side and the industry side about messaging about specific things. And I think that because you guys are in the firearm industry, the difference between a military sporting rifle or an assault weapon or a silencer versus a suppressor. I mean,
but a lot of times, the people that are always going to continue to call it an assault rifle don't want to hear the education portion of it and understand that. So it's talking to a brick wall. So, a lot of what we're trying to do with the education that we provide here is actually just have a conversation with somebody that wants to talk to us on the phone, that wants to come into the store, or now with our videos, putting that information out so that you understand, like, that modern sporting rifle is not an assault rifle. Assault can be a hammer, it can be a paint can, it can be your vehicle, right? So when you use something in an inappropriate way, that is defining the assault portion of it. These rifles can be used for good, they can be used for bad. It's all in how the user intends to utilize it. But the majority of those people that are always going to call something inappropriately, the assault rifle or the assault gun or whatever it might be, don't want to hear that side of it. They've already made up their mind, and it's super tough and frustrating to want to communicate that, and which makes me reflect, okay, well, what am I being stubborn on? What am I not listening to when it comes to, and that's why when I look at 98, when I look at 82, I'm like, okay, what are they trying to fix? What is my thick skull not allowing me to actually interpret, or am I just absolutely fixated on the fact that they're going to take away my ability to do X, Y, Z? And I'm all open for somebody that has that to bring the numbers, bring me the statistics, understand, like, okay, we need to fix this. What do we need to fix? And so, and in talking with those brick walls, it's made me reflect back and make me ask you those questions when you're in the store or listen to your podcast. It's like, hey, what could they possibly want to fix? Why would they want to take away the right that everybody should have in the United States, let alone
I think it's some of it, Josiah, is it's a preconceived notion from individuals that they are ignorant about a specific subject matter, whether it's the livestock industry or the hunting industry or firearms or oil and gas or whatever. They have an opinion, they have a perspective, but they don't know squat about it. And the information they did get was probably off of YouTube or Facebook or something else that it might have been true and it might have been half truth, but it might have been somebody else that was actually trying to get an agenda across and get people to maybe think the way that they're thinking. One thing, and I think I mentioned this to you guys before, when we got air rifles approved through the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission, that to be able to hunt small game. Fred Eichler, who by the way is going to be at our outdoorsmen days.
All right.
He's coming to do a presentation down there, and he's going to hang around for a day on Friday, August 8th. And I'll do a plug for that one before we're done. But Fred went to the Parks and Wildlife Commission because he wanted to get air rifles approved. But he didn't have the knowledge or the gravitas or the institutional or the intestinal fortitude to figure out what he needed to do ahead of time. He just thought that, and I'm not knocking him, he just thought that he could go to the commission and say, look, this is a good idea, you should do this. And when they said no, he's like, hands off, screw this, I'm not doing this stuff anymore. But what we did is when we were at the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, like 2 months after Fred presented to the commission, I set up a deal with Jim Vigil, who was a commissioner at the time, but he was down in Trinidad. And the next commission meeting was going to be in Trinidad. And I said, Jim, it would be great if the commission had a chance to shoot some air rifles. I said, you've got a range down there in Trinidad. And with you being, that's your region, and you're helping set up like the dinner and stuff, it'd be really cool if, I pushed and poked and prodded. So we had R&L air guns come down. Jim turned around and set it up, got the commission to agree to it. And we went out on a shooting deal at the shooting range in Trinidad. And all the commissioners and some of their relatives and other individuals and staff lined up, and there was 30 different air rifles. I mean, from 50 caliber air rifles to 17 caliber air rifles, some suppressed, some they were all PCP, some were single shot, some were multiple shot, some were semi-automatic. They had handguns and everything. And so they did all this. Right. They had a hands-on experience. Then they turned around and made a resolution, and then the citizens petition, and they passed it. My point is that you have to educate people that are uneducated. Now, people that are uneducatable, that's a harder deal.
Right.
But something that I think, and I don't think it's happened as frequently as what it should, especially in this state, there ought to be a day from the industry, maybe it's an individual store, maybe it's multiple stores and business leaders partnering together to turn around and create a legislative education day at Colorado Clays, which is a Colorado Parks and Wildlife facility. And they can go up there and they can go through stages. Right. And they can turn around and say, this is a shotgun, this is, you're shooting trap and skeet, this is an air rifle, and this is a handgun, and this is what you do. Because there's a lot of people that are making decisions on behalf of you and I that don't know a squat about the stuff that they're voting on. And so they talk to their other legislators, and most of them don't know squat about what they're voting on. They just don't want bad stuff. They don't want dangerous stuff. They don't want killings. They don't want assaults.
Neither do we.
No, nobody else does either. But when they can't identify the difference between, and I did, the reason I say this is I did it on the trapping side. When we modified a tremendous amount of the regulations for Department of Ag and CPW, the old language from the Ballot initiative in 1996, which was Amendment 14 that changed the constitutional amendment, it said leg hold trap. That's what it said. You still have to use that to some degree. Right. But there is no such thing as a leg hold trap. They're foothold traps. Yeah. They're body gripping devices, and they're cable restraint devices. We have cable restraint devices, also known as snares, body gripping devices, also known as conibears, and foothold traps. Foothold traps come in a plethora of different settings. But we had to educate people on the difference between what passed, which shouldn't have ever been allowed to pass because there is no leg hold trap, into what we changed it to go along with best management practices and the animal welfare side on the foothold trap. That now is in statute. Right. That's now is set because you had to educate people to make the right decision, to make the provisions and changes. The gun industry is much more complicated. Yeah. Because they want to just turn around and keep throwing stuff at the wall to see what else they can get to stick. Because to them, and I honestly believe this, to them, any gun is bad. A single shot, break open, 410 shotgun is just as bad to them as an assault weapon or what you and I would call a military sporting rifle. It doesn't matter. But when you're talking about legislative things, you don't need to convince all of them. You need to convince the majority. Right. And in the majority of the House and the Senate, now it's going to be more difficult in the House, but in the House right now, until next year, we are at 49-16 in the House and 23-12 in the Senate.
How many of them do you actually think of shotguns?
Less than 30%.
Yeah.
Say I know in the conversations with the CFLA members, we've got several of them that are on the front range that have invited several people that are in political positions to come and shoot, go through a training course, understand what it takes to actually go through the purchase process. None of them have ever gotten taken up on that. And it's just falling on deaf ears. I know they've tried several times in the last election cycle and coming up in this next election cycle. It's just, again, talking to a brick wall.
I think some of it might be delivery, and I think some of it might be the people that are delivering it, the delivery boy. Yeah. Legislators care about their constituents. And if the constituents reached out and decent business owners, and the other thing that I want to say during this conversation, that our community as a whole, sportsmen, gun, the ag community, the oil and gas is a little different. We haven't done a very good job of supporting candidates. We bitch a lot about supporting candidates that are doing well that are willing to turn it. I mean, I'm not saying buying people.
Right.
But the reason that there's a campaign finance side of things for contributions and campaigns is because that's what funds their elections to be able to get done.
Right.
I'll ask you, how much money have you contributed individually to candidates over the course of the last 5 years?
I couldn't even tell you. Probably $100, maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
You?
Less than.
I'm not saying we gotta buy our way in.
Right.
But for people that don't know people.
Right.
Money talks. Maybe.
I mean, if a giant construction, I was going to say a name. If a giant construction company is in a particular legislator's district and he employs 250 people and they generate $240 million a year, that legislator wants to know him because that money comes back into that county.
Yep.
That comes into that district. But if that guy doesn't turn around and engage with that legislator, he doesn't even know that he exists unless he's applying for some sort of a government project or something.
Right.
We don't do a very good job. Remember what I said earlier in the conversation about how many people don't vote? How many ag people do you know that turn around and gripe and moan and groan and complain? They'll get out and open the gate. They'll shoot a prairie dog over there. They'll turn around and take things into their hands, but they don't know who the hell their elected official is. You can't ever get them to go to the Capitol. Now, if they're part of an association and there's some representation,
right,
maybe so. But that guy who has 300 head of cattle has just as much interest as the guy that's got $240 million construction business, or somebody that runs a Baskin Robbins that has 8 employees just trying to stay open on weekends.
Right.
We don't do a very good job of letting our elected officials know who we are and that we care about what they do, and they need to care about what the hell we do, especially on things that are confrontational or contentious. When you start talking about gun rights, when you start talking about agriculture issues, hunting and fishing, recreational opportunities. I mean, how much money do you think is generated on the abortion side of things?
Oh my gosh.
Just on abortion, just for people to talk about and get their point across on abortion.
Yeah.
If we did anywhere close to any of that, just to say, hey, I'm here and I want you to pay attention. Maybe you don't do what I want,
right,
but I want you to pay attention. And I want you to know that if I sat there across the table from you and you are my elected official, that you have to pay attention to me because I brought 10 of my buddies.
Yeah.
And we're in your district. And we're going to remember what you did, or we're going to support what you did, or we're going to praise what you did, or we're going to bitch about what you did. We just don't do a very good job of that.
So Dan, tell us a little bit about your podcast that you got going on and that I love to listen to every week.
Sorry, you didn't get enough of me.
Yeah.
14 months of listening to me rant and rave on Instagram and Facebook. So the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, which I'm the executive director of, we started back in 2016, and we had a lot of credits going to our successes of what we were able to accomplish. And we wanted to make sure that we had registered lobbyists representing sportsmen and women at the Capitol, which now we have 3. Nobody else in the state of Colorado at the time had any. We partner along with Gaspar Perricone with Freestone Strategies, and Gaspar is also representing the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. So now there's a couple different lobbyists at the Capitol. I didn't want to start a podcast, but last year I was on 86 podcasts around the country, and that was it. That was from January 1st to December 31st. So stop and think. I mean, I was on Ranella's with Meat Eater, and I was on Clay Newcomb several times with Bear Grease and
Go Hunt
and Rainey Newberg, and I'm becoming good friends with some of these guys, and they're just great supporters. I mean, they're giving us the unequivocal access that pretty much, if you're here, let us know and we'll put you on, because this is something we can't talk about all the time, but we need you to help us talk about sometime. Right. Because politics doesn't sell.
No.
I mean, these guys are selling product, and they're big companies, and they have this strategy of this formulation of what they're going to do. When we formulated CRWM, and for those that don't know, the mission is to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's it. But we're not. People say, I want to join. Good, but we don't have a membership. You don't get a free magazine. You can buy a hat, but we're not going to give you one. We started it because we needed it. we started the podcast because after winning on 127, and look at the amount of money that was generated and the amount of money that had to be inserted into the fight. I mean, you're talking over $3.5 million on this one campaign.
Mm-hmm.
That's from our side.
Yeah.
Over $3 million on the opposition.
Yeah.
Then there was the Western Heritage Conservation Alliance or whatever the hell they were formulated that they formed. They didn't like our message. They wanted to do their own message. So there was another 1.2 or $1.5 million in that. You got $8.5 million into a ballot initiative about mountain lions and bobcats. I don't have the intestinal fortitude or the time to continually generate the enthusiasm from our side. And so when Bobby Marshall with the Mountainside podcast that you know, I mean, Bobby's badass.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's top notch. Between him and Newberg and even the guys with Ranella, Robbie Denny with Rockcast, Jonathan Redbeard, Clay Newcomb with Bear Grease podcast, the guys with Howl for Wildlife.
Yeah.
They kind of coached us to a point to where if you're gonna do this, we'll give you some pointers and help you out. Bobby has helped out tremendously. Matter of fact, I'm going to see him tomorrow. But doing this podcast with Through the Gates, which by the way is available on every other platform you can possibly get, and it's YouTube.
Yeah.
And when Sean Ender with Peach Creek Films decided we were going to do this, it was to keep people enthused and invigorated to some level. We knew that we were going to lose some people through the campaign because, well, we won and it's all done and over with, and they only remember a Super Bowl champion for about a year or two, and after that they forget that you even existed.
Right.
Nobody remembers who the Super Bowl champion played. No. They just, I still can, and I'm a Super Bowl fan, But in our circle, there's people that don't know who we played.
Yeah.
But we're already starting to see after 6 or 8 or 9 months that our following is starting to peter off a little bit because of the sense of urgency is gone.
Right.
We don't have a deadline. November 5th last year was the deadline. We don't have that anymore. We knew who our enemy was. This time around, we've got multiple enemies. It sounds like we're singing and beating a dead horse here, but money is necessary to continually fund these operations at whatever level.
Right.
And a social media messaging campaign, the education campaign is part of what CRWM is doing. This has changed my life over the course of the last 6 years, and specifically the last 2. I didn't plan on doing this.
Right.
I didn't want to be on Facebook or Instagram. I didn't have a Facebook or Instagram page. We didn't have anything.
Yeah.
I mean, all that stuff was formulated in about a 3-month period. And the first podcast that I actually did outside of the Ranella one and then Santino Castellanos with Beyond the Cast, I did that and think, well, okay, it was cool. And then he took me out in the open field in the snowstorm. It was like 4 degrees below zero. And he said, just talk, we'll just make some social media stuff. Well, when I did, we put that stuff out and we didn't have this following. And all of a sudden, we just started getting
nice
that because of what I said. And he goes, you're about as authentic as anybody that I've ever had on camera. And so when Robbie Denning reached out and Travis with Rockcast, I was sitting in South Park on a ranch, January 1st, running the coyote trap line. And I didn't know. I mean, I was on my speakerphone in my truck. That was the first legitimate podcast that I did outside of the Ranella one, the traveling Ranella one, and the Santino one.
Wow.
Did you get the Starlink mobile now? So you have range
So
everywhere?
now I have range. I have WeBoost. I got WeBoost, so I get it. So, but it's and from there on out, it was literally 2 to 4 or 5 podcasts a week during the show season with the Wild Sheep Foundation. Robbie Kroger came out and helped in a big deal and pulled me into that circle. We had a chance to be with the Western Hunt Expo, and the generous opportunity that the community gave because we gave a good enough message to say, I'm a sportsman.
Yeah.
And everybody said, I'm a sportsman.
Yeah.
And what I don't want to see happen is people start to fall off and go, I'm a bow hunter again, and I'm a prairie dog hunter, and I'm a long distance shooter. And we are all sportsmen and women.
Yep.
And the podcast Through the Gates, I think we're at 38 episodes so far this year. And we're trying to do 4 short ones a month and 2 long ones a month, so 6 a month. 72 for the year, and I've got a chip on my shoulder because of some things that have happened in this administration previous to this ballot initiative, and I intend on riding this horse as hard as I can, as I have been doing. And if anybody watched the movie Young Guns, and when they said we need to finish the game, well, I intend to finish the damn game. And so that's a little bit about what we're at. The podcast, we've got a plethora of different special guests. We had some really badass people on there so far, and we're working our way up, and Randy Newberg has helped out. And we've got some other opportunities this summer for like potential Cliff Gray, Jana Waller. We're working on some other guests that are broader than what most people would think that we'd get this early in the game.
That's exciting. I like that. I can hear those names.
Yeah. That's what I like about your podcast, though, is there's so much truth in it, so much authentic. It's so authentic, right? The people that come on are the people that know the stuff, right? And I mean, you're one heck of an interviewer.
Thanks.
So,
well, I had 86 under my belt. I would be able to turn around and do something.
The way you ask people questions and like the way people, the people that you have on there, it's super interesting. Super interesting stuff. I mean, I don't know. I kind of dabble into the history stuff of Colorado sometimes, and it's listening to some of the people that come on there. It's just like,
they're badass.
Holy cow! Like they come from a time before Colorado has become what it's become. Right. So that what was the last one? The outfitter that you had on. Mark Turner. Yeah, Mark Turner. Yeah. And he's talking about how they didn't know game units and the National Forest and BLM and all these things. And it was just like really interesting to listen to him talk about it, and how they set rules differently and got to be a quarter mile from the road and blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. I thought that was it. I was like, oh, wow, that's actually super interesting to hear about that. Because, I mean, that's different than the area than we're in. And we just don't have that type of stuff here yet. Right. Yeah. But that could be a thing. Yeah.
But then you look at some of the guests like Jeremiah Wilbur.
Oh, gosh.
I had to bust that one up into 2 separate episodes.
Yeah.
And Jeremiah's just a badass. He would have been a kid I would have loved to hang around in school with, because I fought like cats and dogs, but I wasn't a good fighter.
Well, let's get into that. Let's talk about where was Dan Gates, let's say, 30 years ago.
Well, I wasn't doing as much politics, but I was. We were running the wildlife control business, and we had a old-time trading post in Canyon City, Colorado. Okay. We ran it for 25 years, and it was an old-time trading post. It was open for tourist business, but you could bring your deer and elk hides in, or your coyote hides, and trade them for jewelry or ammunition, or get them tanned.
What got you? What got you into that?
I started as a kid. I worked in a taxidermy shop in Colorado Springs at 12 years old. And I fought with my mom and dad tooth and nail, and I moved into the bathroom of the taxidermy shop when I was 15 years old. I finished high school, and I just said, I want to be a mountain man. I want to be a trapper. I want to be a hunting guide, and which all I was. But I was hanging around hunting guides and outfitters and game wardens and Western artists and fur buyers and trappers and ranchers and some of the best salt guys that you could possibly ever get. Wow. Yeah. And that's why I'm probably as hardcore as what I am. It's funny because, and I gotta give a shout out that Tom Schultz with Sanger de Cristo Outfitters, they just donated a hunt to us that the Safari Club Colorado chapter of Brett Axton raffled. And so I've known Tom, I've known Tom 49 years.
Wow.
And of course, now he was one of the guys who used to pick on me. He might still want to pick on me, but he's getting old and I'm getting old. So I tried to kiss him at the banquet we had last year, and I thought he was going to drop me in front of everybody. But no, Tom and his brother Bill were good friends with Al Vallejo, who helped run the taxidermy shop. And Al was a hunting guide and kind of like a big brother and a mentor to me. Last week, I just saw a friend of mine, Dick Hain. Dick is a fur buyer from the Western Slope, but he owned part of the fur shop next to the taxidermy shop in North Colorado Springs, right by the dog track. And it was called Fur World and the Hunter's Moon Taxidermy. And I got the upbringing that most kids wouldn't have gotten because those people all undertook me under their wing.
Wow.
And, they beat the hell out of me. And they let me hang around, and they would get me in trouble, and they would get me in fights. They let me hang around, and that's where I ended up, to what I'm doing today.
What was it like then, the outfitting part, like helping out with outfitting? I mean, who was showing up to come to Colorado to hunt?
Well, I mean, it was pretty much like it is now. It was a different class of people for sure. I mean, working in the taxidermy shop, you saw the guys, and stop and think, this is in the day, and I remember vividly, I mean, an antelope shoulder mount was $125, so it'll give you a little bit of cost of living increase since then. But a guided mule deer and elk hunt was $1,900.
Okay.
And so things have changed
significantly.
But a lot of the people that came out, $1,900 to them was similar to what maybe $25,000 would be now.
Yeah.
But the difference of people, they cared about the experience, I think, more than what people do today. But there wasn't social media. So you had to tell your stories amongst your circles, and there was more of a tight-knit community, and it wasn't so broad reaching to what it is now. It'd be cool to get somebody like Tom to sit and do a podcast. But Mark did a real good job the other day. But explaining how it is now to what it was then is kind of like the difference between, we had 1.9 million people in the state of Colorado in the mid 90s, and now we got 5.9 million people. It's a big difference. I think me growing up in that time was probably a blessing for what I'm doing now, and it's probably a curse for what I want to do now. I started the wildlife control business back in 1987. We were doing it before then, but we actually got the name in 1987. And it was some trapping at the time, but most of it was not what we're doing now. We're doing so much commercial and so much industrial and so much public infrastructure, utility type stuff, and Department of Defense and school districts. I didn't do any of that stuff then. But we got into that because there was a need. When 1996 happened, Amendment 14 was passed by the Colorado voters, 52 to 48%, and banned the foothold trap, the body gripping device, and the cable restraint device.
Wow.
Colorado Parks and Wildlife used to do some of that. And the humane societies at the time used to do a lot of either trap loaning or went out and actually did some of the removal of nuisance wildlife at the time. But when the population exploded to the point to where it went from 1.9 million to almost 3 billion, their budgets didn't increase and their resources didn't increase. So it started opening up significantly for guys like me. In 1996, there was less than 30 legitimate businesses in the state of Colorado that were deemed wildlife control. There were still pest control companies. Now there's probably around 300.
And in 96, when they created that, what was it, the same group of people that we're looking at today? Very similar?
They're a lot uglier and older now.
Similar.
They're pretty similar. Same people. And so I didn't play at that level because the guys that were in the Trappers Association at the time, before we coined it the Trapper and Predator Hunters, they were a lot of my mentors. Guys that I grew up around. And I was just, I was a younger guy, and the older guys, kind of run roughshod on stuff, and this is going to be this way or the highway. I thought that they did things wrong because I didn't think that they were taking into consideration how much Colorado had changed. And that was obvious by the Initiative 10 vote on bear hunting in 1992. That was 70% to 30%. And the trapping community at that time, I don't think they did the right thing. And the reason I don't think is because they made up ground, but they didn't make up enough ground because they didn't incorporate the other sportsman groups in there like what we tried to do on 127. Now, there's some of those old guys still alive. They're 20 years my senior, and we still butt heads on different things, but we won. They didn't. And we won with 6 million people, not with 1.9 million people.
In 92, when they did the bear hunting ban or whatever, Do you foresee that coming back around to the table at all with the current landscape and how much some cities or towns are running into bear issues?
I think the only reason that would ever change is if people got off their ass and went back to allowing the agency to do what the agency sees fit. We're harvesting more bears now than what we did then.
It's crazy to hear the numbers that are not, I'll say quote unquote, published of bear removal. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Isn't that something that should be part of a disclosure as far as like, if we had more tags and more, capability for hunting, less of these would have to be dispatched or removed from urban areas?
Yeah, I think that story could be told better, and if the agency was allowed to fully distribute that information. But when you have political agendas moderating who, when, why, what, where, and how, and what you say, and how much of it you say,
right?
And that's been happening essentially since the Romer administration. You get into Romer, and even through Governor Owens, and then into Bill Ritter, and then into John Hickenlooper, and then into what we currently have.
Right.
It's not been as open and transparent as what it possibly could be.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is, look, the animal rights community is well funded, and they got a squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
And that's going to get the grease.
And you've seen that 92, 96, and continuing.
Yeah, it's amazing that we didn't have something from 96 until 2020. That's 24 years in there that we didn't have anything. And I have to give a lot of credit to the council that I sat on for 8 years, which was the Colorado Wildlife Council. And in 1998, the sportsmen and women came together with a $200,000 stipend and went to the legislature and said, we need an education arm. We need a branch of messaging to the general public. And so that's funded. It was funded originally through a 75% tag fee that went on to every hunting license, and now it's $1.50. I just termed out of that in January of this year, so I was on it 8 years. But starting back in 98, that, I believe, kept a lot of things, use this tongue-in-cheek, kept the wolves at bay until 2020, and then the wolves surfaced. But the kicker is the council could not ever engage in ballot box biology conversations or legislative conversations. That's in the statute.
Okay.
And it was created to where they didn't become a political pawn. They were an education arm. And their education is to show the benefits of hunting and fishing. And they're doing a very good job of it. They did not help on 127, and I was the chair at the time. But it was additive because that message was long going about science in the wild. And when we did our polls, we found out, when we did our polls for the campaign, we found out that science in the wild wasn't really a bad tagline, but science-based wildlife management was better. Right. So both of them went hand in hand with each other. But I want to emphasize, as a kid in the taxidermy shop in 1976 to 1981, 1982, I didn't want to be a game warden.
Yeah.
I thought, because those guys never hunted. So I rode around with game wardens all and it's funny now because it shows how old I am and how long I've been around. When I mention names to guys that have been in the agency for 30 years, and I just went to a retirement for an individual down in Durango yesterday, but you mention the names and they're like, how freaking old are you? Because they've heard
the legends.
The legends of these other guys.
Wow.
And they're like, you were the guy? And I said, yeah, I was the guy. But I'm older than most of these guys. But the science-based wildlife management, I remember as a kid riding around and drilling these guys and grilling them about well, what about this and what about that? And they're like, as soon as you allow the general public to start making decisions on wildlife-related issues that they have no knowledge about, now this is 45 years ago, that they have no knowledge about, there's no reason for us to be here.
Yeah.
And that's what those guys were saying. And then you look at this current ballot initiative crap. There's no reason for them to be here if that ballot initiative stuff goes through. These guys were prophets because they could tell the way that the demographics of people changed starting back then and how it went into the 2000s with 2 ballot initiatives in the 90s.
Yeah.
There's no reason for us to be here if the public is going to start making those decisions. The public that wants all this gone knows that if they can get everybody else making the decision, there's no need for the agency to be there. Period. And I remember that vividly, going around and checking coyote traps or pulling deer out of fences or turning around and catching bears in downtown Colorado Springs in a great big barrel trap and then taking it back out to the woods, or being on the sheep transplant stuff and the Glen Air and the Rampart Range
You got
stuff.
to be a part of that?
I was all of that.
That's awesome.
I was, yeah, it's cool to see what I got to do as a kid, but to see the historical side of where I'm at now, to look back on that and to listen to what those guys were telling me.
Yeah.
I mean, I just told this story yesterday at this retirement party. The guys that are retiring now, or have been retired for 10 years or more, shows how old I am, that I was in federal game warden training classes with them on Fort Carson, and my kid was 3 to 5 years old as a participant. Now he's 34 now. So these guys are at the end of their career, and they remember my little kid, and he was in the truck with me because we were scenario training for federal game wardens. Okay. And then you had observers from the state side sitting there and watching to critique these arrests or these interactions with people in the field. I did all that stuff. I mean, I got to do stuff that they hardly ever even do anymore. So taking experience from people that, whether it's cattlemen, whether it's the good oil and gas guys, the old oil and gas guys, or whether it's somebody that has some really institutional knowledge about water or land use or something, you can't learn everything out of a book. And you can't manage everything off of an opinion and an emotion. Yeah. It has to be off of facts and data. And science is adaptive, but it has to be managed logically with an intended outcome to do what's best for whatever you're trying to do. And I think we've gotten away from a lot of that stuff in the last 10 or 15 years.
I think that's really interesting that you kind of say that. I have a personal experience, and I've kind of talked about it, there's a property that I've hunted in Colorado for about 20 years. In the early 2000s, there was a big oil boom, and they started really, putting in the wells and making roads and doing all that stuff. And there's always the discussion, or there was at the time the discussion that disrupts wildlife and its corridors and that type of stuff. I really thought it was interesting at the time. We were watching deer, elk, everything walk straight over these pads through a bunch of equipment and keep going and do their thing. More recently, one of the landowners decided to sell off to a solar company. Well, they put this solar field wherever they felt it was necessary. Well, it's right in the middle of this, literally it's the corridor of where these animals go. So you would see deer get stuck in the fence, deer get stuck inside the fence, huge disbursements around where they used to follow this drainage to the river. And you're like, what was worse at the time? Mm-hmm. And in a book, it might say different, but in reality, I literally watched it. It was like, that's really interesting that this is the information that's out there, but
stop and look at. And I'm all for it. And we just traveled the Highway 160 yesterday, went down to Durango, turned around and came up 550 and back over on 50. Look at the high fence that we've erected all around this state. Yeah. And in the West, for that matter. Yeah. And I'm all for wildlife crossings. Yeah. But a lot of what we see is no different than a high fence in Texas. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily captivate those animals into a specific location, but it restricts their movement. And I think when you start getting wolves involved in a larger level, you're going to see more and more where the wolves just turn around and either know where to go, or it's easier for them to turn around and do, especially if you're talking hundreds and maybe 1,000 of wolves or whatever. What we saw in the early stages of my life, it wasn't the Old West, but it wasn't what we have today. And I understand that progress is supposed to be changing, for the good and the better. Yeah. But wildlife, as Shane Mahoney said, and I've said this many, many times, wildlife does not happen by accident. Mm-hmm. But the stuff that they have to do to adapt and modify their ability to continually perpetuate their species, just naturally, that is becoming to me more apparent that happens by accident. I was in Canyon City today, and I had to go to Pueblo. And I left from Pueblo, and I came back to Canyon, and then came over to here. So it's roughly 50 miles and 50 miles. That's 150 miles. And this is 4 lanes going to Pueblo, and then coming back over. I saw 13 dead deer. Some fawns, 13 dead deer in one day. And they're worried about us hunting?
Right.
The compensatory loss of wildlife is going to happen through the natural cycle of attrition. Management needs to happen with a common sense approach, but there's going to be death to animals, whether you like it or not. Let's manage them appropriately based upon the science and not based upon emotion.
Yeah.
And I go back to the days when I was a kid and riding around with the game wardens. And those guys then hated to see roadkill, and there wasn't near as many cars on the highway. Yeah. Those guys then did not like going out and killing a bear that was in a trash dumpster because somebody didn't turn around and take care of their bird feeder or their trash can. Yeah. Just like today. The guys don't like doing that. I know guys that have killed 150 bears in their career. They hate it. They hate it.
That's the most bothersome thing.
Yes.
The education piece that they do, and the people who refuse to remove the bird feeders, to lock up the trash cans, to do all. I understand there's accidents that do happen, whatever, but like purposely leaving that stuff out there, come on.
When they're doing it more and more frequently, and with us running the wildlife control business, I mean, you know, we people's like, I don't know why these little bastards keep coming in my yard. Well, let's see, you got a koi pond, you're feeding the bear out here, you turn around and feeding your dog, you got 15 feral cats running around, and you want to know why. You created an oasis, and now your neighbor's having to pay the price for it. You live next to the open prairie, and you got the only water source within like 5 miles, so everybody just turned around and decided to come to this deal. We look at things through a little bitty scope of our lives, and I'm just hoping that, you know, you mentioned something earlier about do we start to see a little bit of a correction in elections or mentality? I think you'll see some of it. I don't know whether you're going to see the pendulum swing back far enough to where it was like it was. It's never going to be like it exactly was. Yeah. But can we make some headway up and just turn around and say, let's follow the science, let's follow the experts? And I said this, you know, because people have criticized me when I say follow the science. Well, yeah, but did you wear a mask during COVID? Okay, well, a 6-week study was not science in my mind. I'm talking about decades and decades and decades of
amazing accumulation of data.
Yes, not 6 weeks of saying, well, this is
look the science now.
Yeah. You know, and so I want people to turn around and let experts make the decisions. And as I said during the campaign, and I hope that people would listen to this, is don't listen to me and don't listen to my adversaries. Listen to the experts. And our agency itself, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, has way too many employees, I think. They got 1,100 full-time employees. They got around 1,100 seasonal employees. I think that's too many. But that being said, 350 of the 1,100 full-time ones are qualified, educated biologists. Every game warden that we have in the state of Colorado, this isn't the case in every state. Every game warden we have in the state of Colorado has to be a biologist. They're a schooled biologist. They're not just law enforcement. They're not just fish cops.
Wow.
We have more game warden biologists than some states have total biologists.
So essentially we're running the, for lack of a better reference, the SEAL Team 6 of game wardens.
And it's being manipulated like Pee Wee Herman and Ronald McDonald because of this governor and the first gentleman.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
So we have these amazing resources that have no voice.
Who are out there.
That are doing it, that want to be, are going to be forced to be removed with all these, the ballot initiatives.
Well, I mean, to throw back in your gun arena real quick. How many sheriffs went and testified against the gun legislation?
Like 3 or 4.
The people that are boots on the ground, doing this, dealing with criminals, dealing with law enforcement, dealing with the practical application of firearm safety and the Second Amendment rights, and people being able to protect themselves. Legislature didn't listen to them.
Even their supposed stakeholding that they provided was not even, didn't even listen to them. Even the stakeholding that they utilized, from the creating the amendments was like, you talked to one sheriff and even what that sheriff said, you completely dismissed and moved on? Like, that's not stakeholding.
I think that we've gotten so far away from looking at logic and facts and data because, well, 78% of all women between the ages of 22 and 44 get most of their information off of Facebook.
Yeah.
That's a fact. Okay, well, how much bullcrap do you see on Facebook? There's some good stuff on Facebook. With stuff we put out.
Of course, yes.
But look at the Iran deal with Trump. Do I agree with it? That they were going to do ill harm and a bad deal? Do I know enough about to make an educated decision that I should try? No. I don't know squat about what the hell was going on in Iran. I get an opinion. Might be an emotional opinion.
Right.
I don't want anybody turning around and telling our federal government what to do when they know what to do. And I don't want anybody telling our Colorado Parks and Wildlife to do when they know what to do.
Yeah.
When I go to somebody's house in my business and they tell me how to do my problem solving for them, I'm like, why the hell did you call me? Well, I didn't know what to do. Then why are you telling me what I should do? And now being in business for 40 years, I can honestly say that we've walked away from plenty of jobs, big commercial projects, small commercial deals, residential things, homeowners associations. I'm probably not the guy. Our business is probably not the guy that you want to work with.
Yeah.
But everybody referred you. Parks and Wildlife referred you. The Sheriff's Department referred you. The Bureau of Reclamation referred you. Wildlife Services referred you. The city referred you. Everybody referred you. When you called me and now you're telling me what I need to do. Either you're going to allow me to do it or we need to separate this relationship now to where we don't have any bad feelings, because you're going to put a bad review about me and I'm going to put a rebuttal about you, and then we're going to be pissing contests back and forth because I solved your problem and you didn't like the way I did it. I think that we need to turn around and have some civility and levity and common sense and a level of decorum and get people back into stay the hell in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
If you don't know squat about guns, don't be telling people about guns. And if you don't know how to do diesel mechanic work, don't do anything about diesel mechanic work.
Yeah.
Have you watched that series Landman?
Yeah.
I tell you what, that's not a hit because people don't agree with it. It's a hit because people are like, yeah, we all use plastic bottles and we all use oil and gas and we all use, even the people that I'm dealing with that don't like the stuff that we're doing understand maybe they don't know as much about it as what they think.
Right.
And there just needs to be some common sense when you're giving this stuff.
For sure.
Wildlife, we're talking about a living, breathing species. And the hunting side of it, the intent is to kill it. That's a hard sell.
Yeah.
Firearms, I think that people have gotten to the point to where they're confusing the utilization of the tool for the reason that people have it. And then they're bastardizing the people that do have it because of the people that misuse it and the people that turn around and do it illegally.
The very small percentage.
Very, very small.
Yeah.
Very small.
We had an interesting, what would you call it? I would call it incident that occurred. We had a gal that did an internship here. She wanted to learn retail business and whatnot. She wore one of our hats to school and was told to remove it because it supported mass shootings and violence. And we are the most supportive company, business, and I would say in this county to young kids, education, learning about firearms, and even stuff that doesn't even deal with firearms, we donate to. And I just felt like that was such a off the cuff, wrong, you don't know anything about what we are as a business, as people. It really bothered me because it was like exactly the same thing. Just stay in your lane. This is somebody who wants to, had a great time here,
Right.
Really
good experience. But
you mentioned that, and I won't go into in depth, but the hat I'm wearing, where it says, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. There was an 8-month Parks and Wildlife investigation with the Department of Natural Resources because I was deemed as a threat to the black and brown community because of the saying on that hat. That was in 2020. That's one reason why Director Prinsloo is no longer with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, because of a saying on a hat. The interpretation of what people have and what they want to do with things is because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You can complain about anybody for anything and turn around and make an assumption or an allegation or an innuendo or an insinuation because I don't like it. And that's what's happening on our wildlife management resources. That's what's happening in oil and gas, the logging industry, our water quality issues, the agriculture industry. I don't like it, and you need to adhere to my beliefs. My interpretation of whatever it is. And I think that we've stepped into the abyss when it comes to a lot of that stuff. And I'm hopeful that once we get rid of two particular individuals in this state's governor's mansion, that things will start to at least level out with some sanity.
Let's come back to just
bring it back.
Maybe a little bit more here.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think you're going to see a lot of that stuff. So
I hope so.
I just appreciate you guys. I think this is. I don't know how you guys feel. We don't need to do it once a week, but but every once in a while, I think it'd be good to circle the wagons because
it's good to get what made Dan, and have a little bit of a history on like what you were a part of, and maybe we even dive into a little bit more of that on the next one, because that's some really interesting stuff that that a lot of people may not even know was happening in the state as far as like collecting the data, being out there and doing the things, and to maybe relive that and kind of go through that. Maybe that will spark some interest in other people that are like I'd be interested in doing something like that.
Just
too.
give you a brief example, and we can start to wind this down. But 1976 and 1979 on Fort Carson, Varlin Perkins with Mutual Omaha's Wild Kingdom did a bobcat study. I've got that bobcat study. Nobody else has got that bobcat study. I was there. I was at the taxidermy shop when that's what was going on. So when people tell me what they have or what they don't have, I'm like, no, you don't.
Right.
If you look at the spiral-bound compilation of information that I've collected over the last 40 years that my wife freaking hates, that there's a spare bedroom that's full of it, that we spend thousands of dollars every year when I find something or something sent to me, and we turn around and get it printed from the printer and spiral bind it. And if it's important enough, there's a bunch in my truck because of what I'm doing tomorrow. But if it's important enough, I turn around and get multiple copies and give them to the parties that might need to know that.
Wow.
My adversaries don't have this. Most people in Colorado Parks and Wildlife don't have this because once they digitized stuff, they purged a lot of stuff. And so game agencies typically don't have things unless somebody just thought it was important enough to sit there and keep it because science is ongoing. But there's got to be a historical perspective to that. And I've been a pack rat of information for the last 50 years of my life. And I didn't like school, but I was really good because I never had to study because I got a photographic memory. And I can turn around, I can argue data and statistics and facts like you could believe. So
absolutely.
Now if I get Alzheimer's or something, I might start to misquote some things. But
you've got enough video of you nowadays. And just keep it going.
So, no, I just appreciate Salida Gun Shop's support and sponsorship, and I know that we're going to continue to build on that relationship. And we've got some big projects in play that I'm sure that you guys want to be a part of, and because I think it's circular. It's circling that wagons. It's not just going 50 different directions.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So
we do have the Sportsman Outdoor Days.
Outdoorsman Days.
Outdoorsman Days.
August 8th and 9th at Pathfinder Park in Florence, Florence, Colorado. It's a 2-day event. It culminates with a banquet on Saturday night, August 9th. You can get tickets through ColoradoOutdoorsmansDays.com, or you can go to the website for CRWM, which is SaveTheHuntColorado.com. We've got guys and gals like, let me get this up before I miss somebody so they don't get mad at me. So we got Fred Eichler that's going to be there. We got Miss Rodeo Colorado, Sam Westfall with Archery in Motion, Laramie Sasquatch Miller, Doug Barnes with Ovis Wildlife Taxidermy, Devin Staker and Dallin Staker, who are professional predator hunters, Jermaine Hodge, world champion elk caller, Ray Livingston off the Mountain Man series and the Lone series, Ralph and Vicky Cianciarillo, Archer's Choice Media, and Heidi Stout with Encounter Outdoors. We got 25 or 30 different seminars and demonstrations, wildlife calling contests with Western Hunt Fest, Guy de Plancher. We've got, it's cool this year because we got two backcountry big tired airplanes that are going to come in and land on site there and then set up a booth there.
Sweet.
So they're going to come in. And the big archery shoot that Wes is doing with Archery in Motion and Valor Archery Challenge. We got chuck wagon dinner on Friday night.
Which is really good.
And it's and I say chuck wagon dinner, it's 6 or 7 chuck wagons that's what they do competitively.
Wow.
And it's old style chuck wagon. We got vendors, seminars, gold panning for the kids. The Amish guys are coming down doing a bake sale again.
Oh, nice.
So either day, you're going to have plenty of activities to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing, if anybody's interested, and it's not advertised yet, but it will be next week, Colorado Parks and Wildlife is once again doing their hunter education class. Last year they did 100 individuals in 2 days, largest class in the state.
Cool.
And it's a completion course. But that'll be on site as well. And then there's wild game skinning and processing that is actually there. There's birds of prey demonstrations, hound hunting demonstrations, blood tracking demonstrations. This is our 3rd year, but it's gotten to the point to where, last year we had 4,600 people with 400 people at the banquet. If we're not over 5,000 or 6,000 people this year, I'd be damn surprised because of the amount of interest we've had so far.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
And just as a quick note, CPW is a sponsor. Fremont County is a sponsor. Western Hunt Fest, Colorado Shed Company, you guys, Salida Gun Shop, the Wildlife Council, Muley Fanatics, Davis Tent, Hilltop Custom Meat Processing, Sportsman for Community, the Colorado Chapter of Safari Club, Whitetail Properties, True Value, High Plains Falconers. You're going to start next week, start seeing a bunch of social media advertisement, and the week after that, you'll start seeing network television advertisement on the Front Range as well.
Nice.
So it's 2 great days. Once again, tickets can be had at ColoradoOutdoorsmensDays.com or SaveTheHuntColorado.com. It'll take you right to it as well.
Wonderful.
Perfect. So
Wonderful.
just look forward to you guys coming down and spending time down there and getting out of the cool country and coming down to the hot country for a little bit. I know Adam is looking forward to that part.
Warm.
Headed to Clovis, New Mexico next week.
Yeah, so you're getting ready for it. But
Thanks again, Dan, for being here with us. I really appreciate the time spent with us. Anytime you stop in the store and then spend time with us today
Thanks.
to kind of go through this. So if you enjoy the show, please give us a like, give us a comment. If there's other stuff you'd like us to review or go over, stay tuned. We've got more to come. Really appreciate you guys.
thanks, guys. Appreciate it.